Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around as we set up some stuff behind the scenes, behind the camera, so that we could show off D20PRO. We are joined by my friend Toby Drewry or apparently Toby Owlbear Drewry. You sneakily added a nickname there for me. The lead developer for D20PRO Virtual tabletop software. And you are joining us to basically talk about D20PRO. So we're going to go through a rundown of what the basics of the platform are, how you get an account, what kind of account you might need to play online, what different kinds of accounts they are, how much they cost, different capabilities. And then you're also going to show us how to join a session as a player, how to create a session as a GM, how to invite players, some of those kind of basic controls, right?
Right, that's correct.
And not only that, but you are apparently going to give us a sneak preview to a build that you were literally working on just now. That you're planning on launching when?
It should be coming out early next week. So this will replace the current production version and upgrade all the things.
Great. So this will be what people will be expecting to use for GenCon Online at the end of July.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Great. So why don't we just kind of hop into what D20PRO is itself? So first, your website is just d20pro.com. Pretty straightforward. And
try.
So you're a virtual tabletop program, but this is not a web-based thing. This is you're going to download a client and run it off of your computer.
Right. So you host. So the GM hosts and players connect to the host. We do have a facility with the new version that helps that connection happen, but we are out of the loop in terms of your actual communication between your players.
So as part of that kind of client, like it's on Windows, you also have Mac and Linux versions, correct? So it's pretty much universal.
Right.
Do you have any mobile clients or anything like that, or just
not currently? Yeah. So in terms of plans, yes, but it needs a UI refresh that is mobile friendly before we can move into a mobile space.
So then what's the actual business model of D20PRO? How does that work?
Yeah, D20PRO has always been a buy once, own forever for the software. The way it works is a GM can purchase a license, and that lets them host games. Players can also purchase their own player license if they want to or need to, which lets them join any game. When a GM purchases their license, they actually get a block of guest seats by default, either 4 or 6 with the 2 standard packs. That lets anyone connect without having to purchase a player seat. They can just download the software, log in as a guest, and they'll use a guest seat. So long as the GM has guest seats available, they can host for as many players as they have seats available. Okay. A player license lets you connect without using a guest seat, so you can add more, or a GM can just add more seats. The actual purchase model is group-based, so if your group wants to rotate who's running, we do monitoring on how often a specific host launches, and we'll contact the host if we see too many simultaneous connections or something. But otherwise, you can share the license between your gaming groups, so that way a gaming group can invest in it as a unit.
So as long as the gaming group is not broken up into 2 and playing at the same time, then it's
right.
Okay. So then, if I was a GM for GenCon, I could buy a 4-player or a 6-player license depending on what kind of game I'm intending to run at the convention.
That's right. Yeah, okay. And then you can add additional seats in order to accommodate a larger group or not.
Okay, but in that case, my players would not have to have any sort of paid account. They can just sign up for a free account.
That's right. And worth keeping in mind, we have a full 30-day free trial, which allows for 6 players to connect. So if you're going to be hosting and you're looking to give this a whirl as your hosting platform, you can actually do that, and it'll be active long enough to allow you to connect, depending on when you start your trial.
Yeah. So I think like if you start it not next week, but the week after, that should last you at least through Sunday of GenCon.
Right. Exactly.
Great.
Then in terms of the pricing, So the software itself normally retails for $50 for the GM plus 4 and $70 for a GM plus 6. And we have been running a sale price since the quarantine happened or started, where it is $30 for the full plus 4 and $42 for the full plus 6. And we'll be maintaining that until GenCon is done.
Awesome. Great.
Or quarantine is effectively actually lifted globally. So
and then I think the other
September.
We'll see. The other thing I think is kind of important to note for GenCon attendees is that you have been an exhibitor for a GenCon for quite a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So you have been to the physical show. You have run events of the physical show. You also bring a lot of the tables that you have with kind of built-in touchscreens and stuff like that use the software physically in person for your players. So you know how GenCon operates. You're kind of part of it for a while now.
Yes. Yeah. We've had a couple of tables set up in the JW for 6 years now.
I think. Yeah, like you and I are longtime friends. Like I played in campaigns that you ran back in Boston before I moved to Seattle. And at this point, I think the only time I get to see you is when we wave in passing at GenCon or on Monday breakfast afterward.
Yeah, when we're both super tired from long time on the floor doing the things we have to do.
Great. So why don't we talk about some of the key features for D20PRO? So
Okay.
This is where I want to make sure we talk about things that can do, also things that can't do. But when you are explaining to somebody why they should pick D20PRO, what are the big strengths of the platform?
So one of the main strengths outside of GenCon specifically is that all the assets that you use for your game are resident to you as the host. So if you go through and you create these maps, you have all this art and whatnot, you're not using up server space and you can have as large a content pool as you want without having to worry about uploading or downloading that content to the server space and then working with it there. The software itself is pretty versatile. It has a scripting engine that lets you use JavaScript to create new abilities and whatnot. That's obviously more advanced features. It has a visual system that lets you use a flow system to create features, which is more user accessible, similar to like the Unreal blueprints, but not quite on that level of expertise. Trying to keep it sort of lower level so it's easier to understand. The engine itself is designed to work at whatever level you want. If you don't want to use automation features, if you just want to use a simple fog of war system where you're dragging a box to reveal areas, we handle that, as well as hiding, or we can use dynamic lighting. When it comes to characters, if you have your character sheets are offline somewhere, then don't worry about it. This still works for all your tokens. You can still key in things like hit points if you want to have a health bar or whatnot, and then the rest of it can live elsewhere. Or you can put everything into D20PRO and let it manage everything from the ground up.
So you can just do the very simple. I'm going to upload a map, and I'm going to fog of war it and just kind of like scribble on the map to reveal areas as the players find them.
Exactly.
Or you can build the map in D20PRO with like line of sight blocking objects and whatnot. So as they come through with their torches, then dynamic lighting just reveals to them what they would see.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if we actually have our. I don't have the Twitch stream up, so I don't know if we have our screen share going.
Not yet, I don't think.
Okay. So yes, in that case, yes. The answer to that question is yes. In fact, you can play this at sort of whatever level you want, whether you want to play Parcheesi on it, or a token-based board game. All that is doable. Or you can obviously use your role-playing game and whatnot. You can create tokens, maps, whatever you want straight from the copy buffer. So if you've got Pinterest open and you want to grab that image of this portrait that you love, you can paste that into your character, no problem. It's all fast and clean in that regard.
And you said that if you want, you can import your character sheets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So then that just raises the question of what game systems do you support, like directly in the game itself?
So D20PRO currently has rule support for 5e, 3.5, so D&D 5e, 3.5, technically 3, and 4th edition as well. It has Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2 support, Starfinder, Esper Genesis, which it has a bunch of the 5e derivatives, Esper Genesis, Ultramodern 5, and Ultramodern 5 Redux. Those are the ones that we've built out rule sets for, which means that we have marketplace content to support those directly. In terms of what can you play on it, I've played Fate, I've played White Wolf games on it. You have to be a little bit more creative if you want to use the built-in character sheets. Those are definitely, the current version of the character sheets are not scriptable. That's definitely a pain point for us that we'll be addressing soon. So with that, you can still use the in-game engine to represent pretty much anything you want. And then with the scripting capability and abilities, you literally can have any game system running. I think the primary limitation that we were facing was the system is inherently grid-based, right? So you're looking at, you move a grid unit. However, we recently rolled out a change which provides free movement, which basically splits the grid into 10 subunits. So you move what apparently is free, right? But it's really just moving in a subgrid.
Close enough, yeah. Like pixel based movement.
It's exactly, it's as close as we can get to pixel movement without having to have the expense of actually doing collision checking on every pixel on your screen.
Sure. So you also integrate with Discord, Hero Lab, a couple other platforms.
Yep, Sirenscape, PC Gen.
Awesome.
Yeah, so Hero Lab, the desktop version of Hero Lab can export POR files, which is their portfolio file. And we have a native importer that actually imports the entire portfolio. It gives you the ability to browse the portfolio and choose which creatures in a portfolio you want to import. Cool. And it does pretty much everything from the Hero Lab character except for spell selection. And that's just a matter of, we'll finish the importer with spell selection shortly. Okay. And then Hero Lab Online currently doesn't have import support, but the plan is there. We're in talks with Lone Wolf about what exactly has to happen to make that work on their end. But we're ready for it on our end.
So what does the integration with Discord do? How does that work?
So Discord integration, well, I wouldn't actually go so far as to call it Discord integration. What we have is we have Chromium integrated into D20PRO. So not the browser Chrome, but the underlying technology Chromium, which lets us run and cross-chatter with any application run within the Chromium engine that we host. So for instance, our 3D dice roller in our application is actually a web app that is cross-chatter communicating with the Java application, which is what D20PRO is, and allows us to pass data between the JavaScript dice roller and the Java application. So what that means is Discord, at the most basic level, you can just run Discord in a window in D20PRO, and you don't have to have a separate browser that you go to and whatnot. Sirenscape is another one that benefits from this. The Sirenscape last year launched their Master Control Center, and this is an online control system that lets you share audio across your gaming community, right? So all your players can actually have queued audio coming from the host. Well, using our extension system, which uses the Chromium bits, you can actually use that to run the Master Control Center from Sirenscape and fully interact with it without having to switch windows in order to manage your audio cues.
Cool. But like if I'm running Discord as a desktop client and then I boot up D20PRO, those two are not going to talk to each other.
They do not currently talk to each other, although the connection bindings are there to allow that. So if you wanted to use a Discord rolling bot or something, we could easily tie that in.
So that ties into one of the other things I think we want to note is that D20PRO doesn't have audio or video chat. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, we did not build audio and video into D20PRO. We had been looking at doing so and came to the conclusion that there were a lot of really great solutions out there that were free. And then as we were actually coming to that conclusion, Discord happened, which was the creme de la creme, icing on the cake, however you want to look at it. And end result is that we got in touch with them. We sat down, we worked with their team for about 2 months actually on architecting direct integration to where the game log in D20Pro would be a Discord channel and all this other stuff. And really came to the conclusion that Discord does what it does really well. And that the right place for that to be was in its own environment where we didn't have to try to track their changes and maintenance in addition to doing our own. And so it does mean that we have currently a split game log if you're using Discord for your gaming and D20Pro. In my own game, I actually run Discord and D20Pro. So I'm hosting my games in D20Pro. My players communicate via text in Discord, plus we're doing our video and sharing and all that stuff there. And it really just means that I don't run the D20Pro game log as a visual thing on the player side. They don't bother with it.
But that also highlights, I think, when you and I have had a couple conversations, over this summer about different ways to play online. You were kind enough to join us on a previous GenCon info stream about generic tools to play online.
Right.
And one of the things that you had mentioned, was using Discord or some other sort of audio-visual chat program running D20Pro. And then instead of connecting D20Pro with some of your players, you just run it yourself as the GM. You share your screen, and they just view it through the one client that they are chatting in. And they say, "Can you move my character over here?" And then you do that.
That's right. So whether it's D20Pro or some other product, a great example is Arkenforge. Arkenforge doesn't have a network component, but it's a beautiful virtual tabletop. If you want to run your game in Arkenforge, you could actually run your online game using Arkenforge by using Discord or whatnot and sharing the screen. Because my players, unfortunately for them, have to suffer through beta builds and development path, there are times where I am not ready to host for them, but I want to run on my build because I'm doing some testing and they're my built-in guinea pigs. And so
I play with enough game designers to know that at least one game night a week is dedicated to them screwing with me.
And so in those cases, I'm always prepared to switch over to just sharing a player view that I'm hosting locally. So if you wanted to use D20Pro in this context, what you would do is you'd run 2 instances of D20Pro, connect to yourself, and then all you have to do is tell Discord, Zoom, Google Meet, whichever, to share just that one window that's the player view. And that'll solve the exact problem of the players only see what you want them to see, but it also prevents your players from moving tokens when they shouldn't be or interacting with the space. We do have a pause function in D20Pro that actually prevents that from happening, but you have to remember to use it. And I'm looking at you, community members.
So like what you were just describing is what you're actually doing right now to show us on your screen what's happening. So
yes.
now that we've now that we've covered kind of the basics for D20Pro, why don't we walk through the actual process of how it works from the player perspective? Let's start there. So, why don't you show us what it looks like if a player wants to join a game that they've signed up for? Maybe they know the GM because this is their weekly game night. Or maybe they've signed up for GenCon Online and the host of that game has sent them the access information through the event messaging tool. So they, it's a couple minutes before the game is supposed to start. They're going to join the session and get ready. What do they need to do?
So the GM, first of all, has access. The GM has to be hosting already, since this is not a server-based solution. You're hosting as the GM. The GM has to have the game up and running for players to connect to it. The GM actually has a handy utility under their options in networking, which lets them look up their current network information, which I just grabbed. And I apologize for doing that quickly, but it has a bunch of other stuff there too. A player, I think that we are sharing now, correct?
Yep, we are.
Yes.
So which because we have both views up now on the screen. Which one is the player view? Which one?
I'm going to minimize these because the only thing that matters is this. A player launches the application, they'll see this interface, they'll get their username down here if they have one. If they don't, they can choose to join as a guest. And if they do that, then we'll say that, this is my rando character here. And the code that they got from their GM in Discord or email or whatever is going to be, they put that in here and do a lookup. That will look up the information. In my case, since I'm connecting locally and Comcast has changed how forwarding works, I'm going to have to set it this way. But so I connect to my local host in this case, and then I just click OK.
Okay.
If I go back to these guys, so the GM is right here, and the GM will be notified that a player is trying to connect.
Okay. It looks like the window that you're in is not being shared with us right now. So Marcus is going to try to figure that out, but I'm not sure, because you're sharing your whole screen, right?
I am sharing my whole screen. That is correct. Mm-hmm. Let me make sure that this is still live. Are you not getting any screen updates?
Not a whole lot has changed for me.
Okay. Should I stop and restart the presentation?
Sure. Marcus, why don't you go back to just the two view, and then he can stop and restart it, and we'll see what happens. I'll let you know when the stream ticks over. But there you go. So the stream ticked over. You can stop the presentation and restart.
How is that?
We will see. We'll get a confirmation from him in a moment before we head back and do it.
Wait, this is so. Go ahead. For people who are hearing us, we encountered this earlier. We're using multiple technologies, and the result is that when I start the screen share for this, it actually mutes the audio on our our conversation. Okay, I'm back.
Great. So Marcus says that it is working. So we should be ready to go to the screen share.
Okay.
When that comes up, I will let you know, and then you can kind of go through that process again.
Okay.
And this should be good practice for anybody who is wondering, what is it like playing games online with people who are new to a system? A little bit like this. So give yourself a few more minutes to sort out these kind of connection issues and whatnot. Just be aware that you're going to have to walk people through a few things if you want to connect in that capacity. Great. So we are now back up to the screen share, and I see the two side by side again.
So I'm launching. So I'm going to close those two for a moment. And so what you have here is the D20PRO launcher.
Okay, I see
and what's going to happen is a player will click on join, and they'll be able to put in a code here, which let me clear all this. And this guy. So when you put the code in that has been provided to you, and your GM has the ability to look this up in application, the player will click on lookup. It'll choose the right IP and port address for them, and configure everything about the application for the game. The player can choose to use a reference. This is just a handy web interface to get to various SRDs or resources. So in this case, I'll choose D&D Beyond. And then when I click on this, that's going to start to connect. We'll go back to our host. Oops. Just a moment. I need to hide.
So basically, the GM is going to give me the code to access the game. I'm going to enter the code, and that's going to pop me into the appropriate game.
Right. And then the GM is going to be notified when a player connects and be prompted to broadcast to them.
Okay.
But I think I clicked on too many things here. So once the player is in, they're going to have their player view. When the player clicks that OK button, which we just saw, it actually synchronizes the view for the player and connected players.
Okay.
One of the questions you had asked me actually earlier before we started the call was actually about disconnecting players. And this player that we just connected, Rando here, is going to get the boot. And so if you've got a player who's being obnoxious or whatnot, the build that we have right now, you can disconnect a player, and that will actually kick them out. And in this case, we're stuck for various reasons here that I'll deal with later. But that player actually gets notified that they've been disconnected and whatnot. For a convention space, I highly advise keeping the option turned on to broadcast, to approve broadcasts, so players can't just connect. They have to be told that it's okay for them to connect once they've made that initial connection to you. Ideally, we won't have any situations where you need to deal with people harshly in that way, but being prepared.
So I mean, the reason to specifically call that out is because if you kick somebody and then they attempt to reconnect, you can just deny them that option, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Now, we do not currently have a mute option for connected players because it's a text chat. That being said, everyone connected to the chat has the option to clear the log on their own. So if you just right-click on your game log and go to clear log, it'll clear out anything anybody said, and you don't have to look at it, deal with it anymore. One of the options that, after we were discussing this, occurs to me is having the GM have the ability to push a cleared log to their players is an easy enough thing to add. So we should have that in the build coming up early next week.
Well, I mean, it's good to know that you are thinking about the situations that might arise and trying to figure out ways to deal with them proactively.
Yes. So once you're in the application, all these windows are completely configurable on both the player and the GM side. They're optional. Like, this is our roster. The roster is used for tracking initiative as well as for a quick access to characters. If you click on a character, it'll center to them. On the player side, the roster will only show you creatures that the player has visibility on or owns. So if you've got 40 monsters hiding in the dark, the players aren't going to see it. They won't show up in the roster. In addition to that, the GM has the ability to set the visibility on a creature. So that can be either permanently visible, meaning that it is always seen, players and anyone connected will always see it. Invisible, which is hidden from everyone except the GM, or dynamic. Dynamic uses Fog of War, whether it's the easy Fog of War or the advanced Fog of War, in order to determine what's visible or not. In advanced, you need to have light sources. In the easy Fog of War, it's just a paint on, paint off. To give you a clue, if we switch over here to the mountain pass, you can see that the player view is updating immediately. This is because I don't have the pause toggled. If I pause, then I can switch maps, make changes, whatnot, and the players won't see anything happening until I unpause, and then it'll synchronize their view.
It looks like we may have lost that presentation again. So Marcus, I think, is going to poke at it. But we did have a question come up in chat about the Discord integration. And they wanted to know, so they were asking whether the integration was with the Discord app or through the browser version. And from what you were describing, to clarify, it's not through the desktop app. It is specifically through a Chromium browser instance that you operate within D20PRO. Is that correct?
So the current integration is through the online web app, in that you can open the web app inside of D20PRO as if you were in a browser. For integrating with plugins or whatnot, that is actually possible on the desktop, in that you can have a plugin, a bot or whatnot on the desktop that's able to communicate to your local port. This is actually both a benefit and a detriment in the Discord world, that you can have plugins that can communicate outside of the Discord sphere. But that kind of integration is doable. Yeah.
It looks like you may have cycled through some windows that seem to confuse the presentation mode. So that is
we'll
why
stop and start it again.
Yeah, maybe a good idea. And we also have about 12 minutes or so to kind of go through.
Okay.
To kind of wrap up with. So before you start the presentation again, is there more?
I have to again adjust the audio in Zoom.
Okay.
Bear with me.
Well, we'll give you a second to do that.
Done.
Great. Awesome.
Okay. So you can see the pink on one side and the black on the other.
Well, we will get there when Marcus kind of puts it back. But what I was asking is, I wanted to confirm what else you wanted to show on the shared screen.
Sure. Yeah.
Before we wrap that up.
So I think showing a spell with spell effects and how that works. And I want to.
We have the share up now.
Great.
I see a map with a bunch of pink on one side,
Right.
and then a map with a bunch of black on the other side. So the right is the player view, right?
The right-hand side is the player view, and
Okay.
the left is the GM view. This is our easy fog of war. So this is using basically paint on, paint off grids. And so I'm going to press F5, or I could click this button up here, which pulls up the fog of war, and I can literally just go in and drag anywhere I want, and you can see it updates and reveals creatures on the other side. Pressing tab switches modes, and we can hide them, and it's done. That's why it's easy.
Okay.
The advanced fog of war, which you can see here. Let me get out of this mode. This actually uses polygons to create our fog of war shapes, as you can see that on the GM side right now.
Yeah, so you took the map and you traced out all the buildings and line of sight blocks.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you can see on the player side how the building tops are black, and that's because the light source on this character, for instance, is not up there. If the character climbs onto the roof and we set his elevation, then he's up there and can do things. Ownership is the other thing. We'll make this guy publicly owned, and so now the player has control and can move the creature around and everything as well. Very quickly, fog of war does have the concept of elevation. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty, you can set the elevation of your fog of war regions. So you could have, because he's on the roof, that character can see everything on the map, whereas the characters down in the alley can't see up onto the roof. You just set the elevation in the fog of war drawing tool.
So then, just out of curiosity, we've shown kind of one map here. If I, as the GM, I'm going to have 5 battle maps over the course of the adventure.
Yes.
How do I switch from one map to the other? Do I have to start a new session or anything like that? Or
nope. So you literally just can switch maps from the main user interface. These are my open maps, or I can go to my content library where I have a lot of maps, and I can say, actually, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use, well, people may be playing that, so we'll use level 2 of Mad Mage, right? And so I just added this to my stack.
Okay.
And you can see the player has been synced to the map, but they can't see anything because it is currently without light sources. So if we drop a light source in there and turn this room on and synchronize the view, the player will get just the piece there. And we're zoomed way out. So so in terms of, let's take this alleyway actually. And so we'll take this guy and this guy over here, and I want to move them. So I just did a control click to select them. All this stuff is accessible from menus, but I'm going to go through and do this quickly with keystrokes. So M to move. Now I have this little reticle, and I can say, okay, I want this creature to come over and let's say, actually, we'll go over here, and they're going to come duke it out in here. And so this takes a little bit of adjustment, but now they're in this section of Mad Mage, and now that they're in their own little isolated space, this guy is actually going to go ahead and throw a fireball, which is overkill for one target, but we'll do it anyway.
You just wanted to show off your spell effects.
I do actually. So right now in this specific build, I'm having to manually set the caster level. And apparently I'm going to get an error because of that. But it did show the damage and the spell effect and whatnot. We have the ability to do persistent effects, so you can actually drop in regions, and those regions will persist, and when a creature walks into them, they'll trigger effects and things like that as well. But again, that's optional, not specifically necessary.
So as a GM, if I'm running the same game multiple times over the weekend, can I set a scene and a map and monsters and save that and replicate it so that I don't need to reset it manually later on?
Yeah, so for instance, if we go back into here, so let's say that actually, so I've gone into this alleyway. It's just it's got everything set up on it. So these are actually map markers, for instance, that are placed that have details about how to use the game and whatnot. But so I like this new layout. So I'm just going to come up here and click this little save button, and that'll save it without closing it. Or I can close the map, and it'll say, hey, by the way, you're closing this. You're going to remove these characters from play, and they're going to be saved to the map. So now if I go back into my library and we go to the alley, I can say, hey, alleyway, go ahead and open up. And so alleyway already has all those creatures in their locations, lighting effects, any spells in effect, all that stuff is just saved in its current state when we close the map.
Great. So then, like, if I'm running the same adventure twice a day over the course of the weekend, I can spend all the time kind of building it and then just save it in a ready to deploy state and then bring it out for each game.
Yep, and the way to do that for GenCon is to use our campaign templates. What you do is you create your campaign or your adventure, and then there's actually an option, and this is currently, I apologize in advance for the UI here, but under our game options, there's this itty bitty little save button that hopefully will be bigger next week, that is create a campaign template out of the current campaign. And what that does is it creates a campaign template, which obviously that's what the button says. What that allows you to do is when you create a new campaign when you go to host, which let me do that very quickly here. So let's go back to here. I'll launch this. So with the application launching as a GM, I'm going to come in and say I'm going to host. I'll go to manage campaign and create. And from here, I can select any campaign templates I have installed. And so I could have, the Swamps of Madness is my adventure that I'm running. And so I create a campaign template out of it. Then when I go to create a new campaign, I can use Swamps of Madness as a template, and it'll be in the state it was when I saved it as a template. So I can start that game each time we need it and create a new one for every session.
Great.
Yeah. Again, we built that with the intent of running multiple, games of the same exact style every day.
Great. So I'm asking chat if they have any last questions.
Sure.
So then for you, is there anything else? So I think the key important things right here that we need to want to remind people of is A, there's a 30-day free trial. B, this is a buy one license, use in perpetuity, local software. It's not web-based. You download and install it on your computer.
That's right.
As part of that license, you as the GM, let's say, can buy the license to allow either 4 or 6 players by default. Those are the 2 packages that you're selling.
Yep.
To just be able to play anytime that you are running from your account. They can sit down and play.
Right. And you can have up to 32 players or guest seats on a single license.
Great. And individual players can either use their free account or they can use your, they can just log in, or they can buy their own account to connect to your game without using one of your free slots that you have the license for.
That's right. Yes. And for reference, upgrading from a player license to a full license is exactly $10 less than buying the full license.
Okay.
So
anything else that you really want to kind of hit from that perspective that you want to make sure people remember?
I think probably the biggest thing to mention is that we have a Discord channel that we are very active in. The community is active there as well, meaning that there's a lot of people there who are willing to help out and teach you about the rule systems and how to build classes and spell effects and all that kind of stuff. That's super helpful. It's also why I put Owlbear in that name moniker, because that's the title or the name that I go by in the Discord channel. So.
Sure. And then I think the other thing we want to emphasize is that what you were just showing us there is the sneak peek at what you're hoping to roll out early next week and that you're still working on.
That's right. Yes. So that'll be an early next week release with one of the major changes. If you get the version that we have right now, it does not have a real-time movement. So supplying that our share is still working. When I'm moving this character, you can see the movement occurring on the other side. In the current release that's out there now, when a player moves or a GM moves, it's after the movement is completed that everyone is updated. So we've modified that conversation.
So it's the classic chess thing of you haven't moved until you take your finger off the piece, and then you can't take the
exactly. Yep. Figured I'd just attack somebody, but I missed. I rolled a 3. It's a wizard.
All right. Well, we are just about up. I didn't see anybody else in chat who had a question, but I wanted to thank you for coming out. Thank you for managing to get a little bit more done on the build that you wanted to preview for us.
Yes.
And thanks for jumping through the hoops that we needed to figure out to get you to share that with us. And did you want to make any statement about what events D20PRO might be planning on doing themselves at GenCon before we leave?
Sure. Yeah. So our plan right now is to offer, we're going to offer either one or two specific crawl adventures, so a dungeon crawl. And the number that we'll actually be offering, I think there's going to be 3 sessions of both or 6 sessions of one at the very least, and then we'll expand it after those are full. And then we're going to do, we're also going to offer a couple of workshops on D20PRO. And one workshop is going to be centered around art, so it's more VTT general. The other one is going to be centered on D20PRO specific features, how to build features, spells, effects, how to do difficult terrain and elevation, and the more shiny advanced features, attacks that have multiple special effects after an attack fires, like a hammer of thunder and lightning that does insane stuff. Those things. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is if you were intrigued by what you saw here, but you're not ready to run your own game in it, you can play games during GenCon Online with a free guest account.
Yep.
Or a free trial. And you will also be hosting seminars and maybe workshops, it sounds like, that will give people a little more hands-on experience and training with how to use a number of these tools.
That's right. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. I always appreciate it when you come out and share your online gaming expertise with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I hope that, I suppose since we always have to have brunch-ish after GenCon, we'll need to figure out how to set up some sort of Zoom call or something like that and have brunch the Monday after GenCon Online, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds so. I'll reach out to you about more details, but yes, that is extremely doable.
Sure. We'll have to figure out who actually gets the brunch time because since you're on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast, one of us is going to have to wake up early or eat lunch instead.
This all works. We'll meet you on your side.
Thank you again, Toby. Thank you again for everybody who is watching. Stick around because in probably about 30 minutes, we will have Board Game Arena on. So if you are more of a board game player and less of a RPG player, then we're going to talk through some of those. One of the options you can use to play games directly through the browser. We'll have the same kind of questions for them. What kind of account do you need? How do you join? How do you start? Who needs to pay? What do you need to pay? What's free? Things like that. We're trying to give you a sense of what do these tools actually feel like and look like so that when you see the event schedule in early July, you will have a sense of what events you're comfortable and interested in trying out. So that will be in about half hour or so. Should be starting right around 5 p.m. Pacific. And then don't forget, we also have a whole bunch of other shows on our channel. Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have Board Games with the Brothers Murph. Wednesday, we will have This Game Gets Dicey at 1:30 in the afternoon Pacific. And then after that, at 4 p.m., we have Fireside with Peter Atkinson. And then after that, we will have another GenCon info stream. Let me just pull up exactly who we have so I can remind people about it. Next week, it will be, I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Next week, it will be Fantasy Grounds. Will be the Wednesday info stream. That's another D&D focused or RPG focused client you download. Next Friday, we also have Table Takes, obviously at 2 p.m. Pacific, and then at 3:30 Pacific, we will have, let me see, we have Astral, which is an online web-based virtual tabletop. And then at 5 p.m. Pacific, we will have Tabletopia, which is again another board game play through your browser kind of interface. Remember to like and follow the Twitch channel so that you are notified when we have new videos that come up. So it's easy to find. because I find it's a lot easier to track down who's live when you're following them. If you've missed any videos, or if you want to refer to this later, it will be up on YouTube about 24 hours after the broadcast. And make sure to subscribe to our newsletter and stick around for more from Board Game Arena in a few minutes. Thank you very much.